Hello, everyone. Welcome to Solo Arts Heal. I'm Gail Schickley. Tonight, we present a special encore performance of one of our first shows on the Marsh Stream, acclaimed jazz vocalist, author, and arts educator, Frederick Johnson. Following his performance excerpt, we welcome Susan Magsamen, Executive Director of the International Arts and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. This show tonight helps us understand the integration of arts in healing. To help us learn about the healing power of the arts, first offered here on the Marsh Stream at the onset of the pandemic in 2020. Here, we featured on our Solo Arts Heal Collective and artists worldwide in shows about mental, emotional, and physical struggles, reaching out to audiences through performance and talkbacks, offering resources to our audiences in theaters, schools, medical centers, and more in our communities and worldwide. This encore performance is a harbinger of what's to come in January 2024, when we invite you to join us again in welcoming Frederick Johnson and Susan Magsamen in a presentation of the breakthrough that links science and arts with the healing power of the arts. Thanks to Magsamen's tireless work, outlined in your New York Times bestseller, Your Brain on Art, we'll revisit the life-altering journey through the science of neuroaesthetics that offers proof of how our brains and bodies transform when we participate in the arts, and how this knowledge can improve our health to flourish and to together build stronger communities. As this groundbreaking work shows, and the book aptly describes, many of us think of the arts as entertainment, a luxury of some kind. In her new book, co-authored with Ivy Ross, we learned how experiencing performance and activities from painting to dancing to expressive writing to architecture are essential to our lives. Tonight, enjoy this performance by Fred Johnson, artist in residence at the Straz Performing Arts Center in Tampa, Florida, who has recorded and toured worldwide with jazz and R&B legends Chick Corea, Sonny Rollins, B.B. King, Patti LaBelle, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, and more. Enjoy this performance and our compelling talk back with Fred and Susan as we continue to reach out to you through the arts, offering real information and advocacy on a variety of medical issues. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Frederick Johnson.
Rock my soul, rock my soul, rock my soul, rock my soul. Started out my life from womb to loneliness. Seems like in the beginning I had a feeling deep inside that I couldn't understand. See, I began my journey from foster home to foster home to foster home. 18 months old, they tell me I was when I was first deemed a ward of the state in the state of New Jersey. You know, I don't remember a whole lot about that. The beginning, I mean. What I do remember that started with me and has stayed with me all my life is the sound of my voice. Wasn't privy to a whole lot of tapping and holding. Wasn't privy to a lot of sweet talk and love talk. But in the stillness of the night, I could hear the frequency of my own voice. And I'd lull myself to sleep at night. That was my mama. Didn't know who my mama was. Scary thing not knowing who your mom is. Something that sticks with you all of your life. I could feel deep inside this feeling in my being. It helped me to stay alive. And then I discovered motion, rocking back and forth. And I've been rocking ever since. Early on in my life, I just create that sound. I could feel it on the inside. It was like a caress. It felt so good. And the more I moved, the better it felt. You know, it was just like a part of my whole being just to be able to rock and feel my breath turn to sound. Maybe it didn't sound so good outside, but it felt so good on the inside. It was my way of knowing how to feel right, how to feel, I think, what they call a sense of peace. Story goes that it was really kind of difficult for me to get adopted. You know, I mean, I was this chronic little rocker and sound maker. But that's kind of how I knew the world. It's how I knew to feel all right. And I don't remember a lot of the places that I went to, but I remember this one night, you know, where I was rocking and I was sitting near a wall, had gone to this family's home. I think they really wanted me to be a part of their family, but I had this thing where I rocked and I made noise. And then I remember this one particular night, I was near a wall and I rocked and I hit my head against the wall. And all of a sudden, this amazing sensation went down my back. And I was like, oh, that feels so good. And so as I rocked, I would just lightly hit my head against the wall. And it just seemed to add to that whole sensation. And then I'd just add some sound to it. And I heard some footsteps coming down the steps, and I heard two people say, I heard him say to her, look, that's enough. That's enough. I know you want a child, but that's enough. Something's wrong with this boy. Something's wrong with this boy. It's not normal for a child to do that. And the more I could feel sort of the energy, like I had done something wrong, like the more I rocked, and I'd hit my head against the wall, boom. Stop, he said, stop. Stop, boy. And he looked her in the eye and he said, something's wrong with this child. Something is wrong with this child. And then I was gone. Back on the road again to another home. Back on the road again to another home. You know, when I first was introduced to language, for me, it was comfortable for me to sing what I was thinking. But think of it, it's kind of a natural thing. I mean, for me, I think because I was so attuned to and so connected to sound, it was just a natural thing for me to sing a phrase. But I mean, the first phrase that I ever heard that I can remember, and I'm sure you can remember too, is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. So it was natural for me, but it felt right. So if someone would say, how you doing, little Freddie? I'd be like, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, I feel so good. And some people would laugh and some people would say, something's wrong with that boy. Something is wrong with that boy. But it was my way also of kind of living into understanding how people reacted when I did this continuous tone singing thing. One particular thing, the last home that I was in, the woman who took care of her name was Nana, and there were 6 other children in this particular home. And of course, I was the smallest. I wasn't necessarily the youngest, but I was like the smallest. And I remember one day she said, listen, y'all, I want y'all to understand this. Stay away from that corner over there. She said, come here, Freddie. So I came over near and she said, Freddie, you like to sing? Sing light bulb. And I said, light bulb. She said, sing light bulb. And I said, light bulb. And she said, light bulb. And I said, light bulb. Don't touch it. Light bulb. Y'all hear that? Don't touch that light bulb. It'll burn you. And when they come around here to check on you all, then I'm going to get myself in trouble. I don't need no trouble from any of you children. You understand? Light bulb. Don't touch it. I felt the power of that. And all of a sudden, the dynamic of sound took on a whole nother dimension for me. But when I felt funny, when I felt bad, when I felt scared, when I wondered, who's my mama? I just lean in and rock, 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 rock my soul. Long as I can remember, I've been rocking and singing my song, journeying through life from the inside out, seeking to find my way, especially on the darkest days. I just keep on going and let the music rock my soul. Let the music rock my soul. In 1956, when I was 5 years old, Robert and Pearl Johnson came from Trenton, New Jersey to Morristown, New Jersey. And I remember that morning, Miss Nana said, now, Freddie, don't you get them clothes dirty. I'll be laying out in the sand like you like to do in the backyard. We got some people coming here today. They want to meet you. The Johnsons, they want to meet you. Pearl and Robert Johnson came. I had another little buddy there in the home with me. His name was Otis, and he hung kind of close to me. So when Mr. and Mrs. Johnson came in, Otis was standing right next to me. And Mr. Johnson, Robert Johnson, he kind of took a liking to him because Otis ran over and kind of tapped him on the knee, and he laughed and said, what's your name, boy? But Pearl, she kind of liked me, and we sat down and talked while Mr. Robert and Otis went outside in the backyard. Turns out that Pearl and Robert decided that they wanted to take a chance on little Frederick. And so Miss Pearl said to me, you know, Frederick, I think we'd like for you to come home and live with us. Would you like to do that? Would you like to come home and be with us? Be in our family? And I looked Pearl Johnson in the eyes and I said, Miss Pearl, are you my mama? Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very moving. Thank you, Frederick Johnson. Moving story. And how old were you at that point?
I was five and a half.
Five.
Five. It was the spring of 1956. I was
Hmm.
5.5 years old, and that, and I did go home with Pearl and Robert Johnson, and they raised me, and they were amazing folks. They put up with the rocking and the noise, the noise making. But they were really, really good folks. And I will tell you, there's an amazing end to that story, really. After 67 years of not knowing anything about my family, not knowing who my mother and father were, and being raised by Pearl and Robert, and they were really, really magnificent people, and God rest their souls that they've passed on now. But they passed a mandate in the state of New Jersey, that people who had uh, been adopted uh, could have the opportunity to get their pre-adoption birth certificates. A year, they allowed a year to go by, so that if there were people that were still alive that had put children up for adoption, and they didn't want them to know, all of the information about them, that they could talk to the state and block some of that out. But it turned out that that wasn't the case for me. So I put in an application. You had to apply, and I was able to get my pre-adoption birth certificate. And at the age of 67, um, which was 3 years ago, I I was able to actually find out that I had living siblings. Had the opportunity to meet them. Had the opportunity to find out who my mother was, Lily Mae Barney, and my father's name was James Ward. And I speak to my brothers and sisters every day now. And that's a whole nother part of the piece, having the experience of unconditional love. And so I truly believe that, in those early developmental years when I was rocking and creating sound, it prepared me for a level of understanding that allows me to be who I am today, that allows me to have an understanding of the sensitivity of sound and frequency, and a sensitivity towards the fact that you just never know when you meet somebody what their experience is. So I'm very blessed for that. And I'm blessed every day to know who I am, to know who my mom is. My name, my birth name, my given name was Frederick Allen Barney, right? And so my brothers and sisters, they call me and they say, "Hey, Frederick Allen, how you doing, Frederick Allen?" So it's a really, really beautiful end to a very, very interesting journey, a very interesting story. So thanks for allowing me to have the opportunity to share a little bit of it with you.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a beautiful story. And now the way you open your whole heart up to communities all everywhere is such a beautiful thing, and it comes from a beautiful place. Were you always studying music? That was
Um,
the main focus.
Music has always been, yeah, music was always a part of my life and a part of my being. And I did. I mean, when I first began to talk, I mean, it was really comfortable for me to sing what I was thinking. And then years later, I had the opportunity to meet these two amazing teachers from West Africa. And it turns out that there are tribes and members of community, and that's their whole thing, is to be orators, and to have that ability, that spontaneous ability to tell the history of the community, and also bring people's dreams to reality through song and stuff. So it's a part of my DNA. I was created in the world, and I always did that for people. My whole life, I always did that. As I got into middle school and high school, I became very interested in musical theater. um, and did a lot of summer stock theater and took acting classes and things. And then, when I became an adult, after I got out of the Marines, got out of the service, and wanted to further my acting career, and and found it difficult for young brown guys like me to find roles in New York City and on Broadway. I had the opportunity to go visit my parents one day in back in Trenton, New Jersey, and went to the library, and there was a gentleman there by the name of Kenyon Martin, who had been a student of Marcel Marceau, and he was an amazing mime. And during the course of that afternoon's performance, without sound, I watched him create characters and make me cry and make everybody else cry. And I said, you know what? I want to know how to do that. And so for 7 years, I studied and was a principal performer with the National Mime Theater in Boston. And it was during, I believe, those periods of studying nonverbal theater through silence that I became even more attuned to and connected to sound, and became, on some level, a better singer, and a greater understanding of the dynamic of sound, and the importance of how we say what we say, how much we say, and the connection between our hearts and our words. So
Wonderful. Something we all could use a bit of a bit in our lives. Tell us a bit about the instrument you're playing.
Yeah, so this instrument is called a chordophone. It's a part of the indigenous string family. Although, if you look up chordophones, you'll see guitar, you'll see violin. So chordophones are stringed instruments that have a vibrating mechanism. And throughout Africa, there are a number of different stringed instruments. The one that's best known probably around the world is the kora from Africa, which is kind of the great grandfather of the harp, and the harp family has 21 strings. The chordophone, this particular chordophone is played by the storytellers and the healers, and has traditionally either 4 or 6 strings. And you have to participate in the making of the instrument, studying of the tradition, the making of the instrument. And it's an interesting, very similar, like the kora. It's made from a calabash. The covering is goat skin. But if you'll notice on the kora and many African instruments, that the hair is not there. But traditionally on the instrument that's played by the storytellers and the healers, the hair remains on the skin. And I actually have a couple of these. I brought this other one too because it's really it's 4 stringed, has an ornate calabash on it, but it
Oh,
has four
beautiful. And you
strings.
make your own instruments. These are made,
Yeah,
handmade by you. Yes.
yeah, and with the help of some other arbiters and craftsmen. This particular branch here is just an old branch of the tree, which with a natural curve. The pegs are cut in, and interestingly enough, the strings the strings are monofilament. It's fishing line. It's
I
fishing line.
love the
So
sound. It's just so rich. Thank
yeah,
you.
thank
Well,
you.
I thank you so much. I want to bring into the conversation our guest, Susan Magsamen, but first, I do want to remind the audience that posted in the chat is the tip jar. The Marsh receives about, I think, 70% of its funding through ticket sales, and there are no ticket sales. So any support you're able to give is much appreciated. And also, we encourage questions from the audience, which you may post in the chat, and we'll answer as many as we can. Our wonderful producing director, Brian Williamson, and production assistant, Brianna, will help us keep an eye on that. And now, please, I'd like to welcome into our conversation Susan Magsamen, founder and executive director of the International Arts and Mind Lab, a pioneering neuroaesthetics initiative from the Brain Science Institute at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Her body of work lies at the intersection of brain sciences and the arts, and how our unique response to aesthetic experiences can amplify human potential. Magsamen is the author of the Impact Thinking model, an evidence-based research approach to accelerate how we use the arts to solve problems in health, well-being, and learning. We'll hear more about that from her. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's just thrilling to have you here. Please tell us about your work and I mean, perhaps you want to give an overview first before we get into some of the special impact thinking.
I'd be happy to. First of all, Fred, I just want to say how moving your piece was. And I want to say also that there is something very right about you as a little boy. And I think just thank you for being you. It's really extraordinary. And I've been really blessed to become Fred's colleague and also friend. And I'm hoping that he will also share a story about a song that he had in his head from the time he was a little boy that he ultimately learned was a song that his mother sang to him. And I think that's a real important segue into the work that we do in the lab, which is really looking at how the arts change our brains and bodies. And we know that the arts change us in such profound ways. And that happens from the time we're very, very little. And it stays with us throughout our lives. And there's a real strong autobiographical narrative to that. And I think Fred illustrates that in so much of the work that he does.
Yes, please do tell us this story.
The story is that, so I grew up and, became involved in the theater and traveled around the world and made my living a good portion of my life as a jazz singer, traveling the world doing jazz. And when I was 7 years old, I actually went to a theater with my parents in New Jersey, and to see the movie Carmen Jones. It was the Harry Belafonte and Dorothy Dandridge, and it was this, it was a movie, had an all African American cast, and it was based upon the opera Carmen. And so if this was a huge premiere, and usually there'd be babysitters and things, but everybody was going to this, and I had a bit of a reputation for being a challenging child to sit. So anyway, ended up going to my parents, and it was a really, really important experience. Went there and watched the movie, and the announcer made an announcement beforehand. He said at the conclusion of the performance, please, we're just going to take a brief intermission. Please don't leave the theater because we have a special surprise for you. So at the end of the film, I was tired. My dad told me just go to sleep. I was sitting on his lap and I fell asleep on his lap, and I awakened to the sound of an orchestra, and um, an announcer said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the RKO Trent Theater is proud to present Mr. Nat King Cole." And Nat King Cole came out on stage, and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the energy that was in the room. I'll never forget looking back at my dad, and he had this look on his face like I'd never seen before. And I looked over at my mom, and just everybody in the room was just like mesmerized. And of course, Nat Cole had this amazing voice. And there was one particular song that he sang during the course of the evening, um, and it just touched my heart. It was like I couldn't really understand it, but there was something really powerful about it, and I loved that song. And I remember that day saying, I want to be able to do what he does, and so the song was, there was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy. They say he traveled very far, over land and sea, a little shy and sad of eye, but very wise was he. And then one day, one magic day, he came my way. And as we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this he said to me: the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. And that became like my song. I mean, I loved that song. I had that song in my head from the time I was 7 years old. It was one of the first songs I learned. I sang it all the time. I grew up, I went out into the world. I sang it everywhere, everywhere. It was just like, it was such an amazing song for me. So jump ahead to when I was blessed to be united with my brothers and sisters. One day in one of our first talks that we had, we go on Marco Polo, which is this app where you can have conversations back and forward. And we were in this conversation, and I said to them, I said, guys, it turns out that one of my brothers, all my brothers and sisters could really sing, but my brother Eric can really, really sing. He's an amazing singer. And I was saying, I realize that you guys love to sing. You have these great voices, and my whole life, song has been such a really important part of my life. And I said, and there's one particular song that I've sung since I was a child, and I just want to sing it for you. And I began to sing. There was, and I could hear like a whimpering, like a cry, and I stopped, and my sister Christine was like crying, and I said, Christine, I'm sorry. What's wrong? She said, no. She said, don't be sorry. She said, Fred, that was Mama's favorite song. So I'd never really met my mother. It's never spent any time with her, but that was her song. That was the song that she sang, you know,
Mhm.
and that was the song that she sang to me as a child. But I didn't know that. But on some level, I did. On
Sure.
some level, it was a part of my being. You know what I mean? And I mean, that was like the song. If somebody said, "What's the song that touches your life?" and I would do Nature Boy. It turns out that Lily Mae Barney, that was her favorite song.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. One of my favorites too. Such a gorgeous song. What a lovely story. Thank you for bringing that up, Susan, and for telling us, Fred. That was
I just want to say that I mean, I feel really fortunate to be able to have this conversation. And what I want to say, about solo artist heals is that that's the power. the power in having the opportunity to have artists who are sharing their life story, sharing their healing experiences, sharing their coping experiences, the power of being a caregiver. I mean, this is so important. You know, we have the great advantage in our lives to have theater so that we can come together and really recognize and feel our commonality, share our pain. And it's so very, very important. You know, I mean, being a person at the Strass Center who's involved in creating works of art, but also working with programmers and people. You know, the first question that was asked when people, when these amazing artists were, you know, trying to find ways to bring their artistry is, well, what's the audience? You know, who's the audience? What's the audience for this? As if there's not an innate human element inside of us that knows the truth of emotion, that knows the truth of feeling, or has never had someone who took the journey with cancer to share their deepest feelings so that someone can say, oh my God, I felt that too. Or, oh my God, I watched my mother go through that or my father go through that. You know, this life experience that we have, it's not just the joyous or the super dramatic things. It's the art of life and living, and solo artists that heal, the whole concept of bringing healing experiences, healing replications to the stage is something that we certainly always have needed and we certainly need now. So, you know, as someone who is involved with a major performing arts center, you know, one of my goals is to help the performing arts world to know it is so important for us to have these experiences. And it's cathartic.
Mm-hmm.
It's cathartic for the artist, and it's cathartic for the audience. Susan, you know, would you share some of the research and understanding that of what happens when someone comes into the theater, when someone experiences it?
Sure. You know, it's everything Fred says really resonates, and I wanted him to share that story because I think that music, in Fred's case, is so cellular and it's with us throughout our lives. And you know, we know a lot of stories about how people can still remember those songs when they have dementia and when they have Alzheimer's. So their hippocampus can hold on to those songs and they can be activated and released even when other parts of their brains aren't working. You know, during the time of COVID and also during this police brutality and unrest, we're in such an unprecedented time where disaster and highly unpredictable experiences are happening to us, things that we've never had before. And so there's some really interesting public health models around the natural cycles, much like the grief cycles we know about, where you go through different phases. There are different phases in a disaster model where, you know, you feel like you're shocked, you're paralyzed, but then you feel like it's going to be okay, and then you kind of go, well, I've got to readjust. But most disasters, you know what the end is. With COVID-19, we don't know what the end is, and with the new uprising around social justice and police brutality and other issues around structural and systemic racism, we don't know where it's going to go. So our bodies and our society are really in a heightened state. And that's where the arts can be incredibly healing for the individual, because we're able to calm our central nervous systems, we're able to settle ourselves, we're able to find peace. Like Fred's rocking, I think, is such an amazing, and his sound, his vibration is such a great example of when you are in a traumatic situation, what you do to soothe yourself. And this act of soothing yourself is incredibly important, finding safety in unsafe places. And we know a lot about that neurobiologically. We also know that there's restoration. So there is safety, and then there's this idea of restoring, and then there's community. And how do we come together to feel a sense of belonging? And so in this time, there's also a lot of isolation and a lot of loneliness. And the arts in all of its forms have the ability to help us come together and to feel connected. And that happens, in many art forms, but the neurobiology of that often includes oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine. And so as we understand that, we're able to begin to talk about it. And I talk a lot about the arts very much like exercise or sleep or nutrition. We need those things to live, and we need the arts to live, and we need the arts to survive. And pre these new experiences that have really broken down social structure, I think we were very transactional. We were moving through our lives for better or worse, and not really feeling those things that we needed. And I think right now we see each other gravitating towards making, listening, whether you're an active participant in making or whether you're passively receiving art, maker or beholder, where both of those experiences in the arts are helping us to feel safe and to feel connected. And I think that's going to be really important for us as we move forward.
Indeed, it is. It's the arts just as vital to our health as medicine is.
And it is medicine. I think the arts are medicine, and part of our work is really showing the biology of that, but also how do you move that? So there's basic science around the arts. There's how do you translate that? So there's translational science. How do you move that into clinical work and into practice? And then what are the policies and the funding for the arts? Currently there's very little funding for arts research. The NIH and NEA, and actually it turns out the Department of Defense, in helping to support veterans and active military for PTSD and traumatic brain injury, have had more support in understanding how those tools could really be used to help in things that are intractable issues that are really, really damaging to the military. We're also seeing that now in other areas. So there's an initiative called Sound Health that Francis Collins, who's the head of the NIH, allocated $20 million to study sound around autism, Alzheimer's, and other kinds of neurodegenerative diseases, to think about how that might help us. So there's a movement in this country, but globally there's a movement to really understand how arts as medicine can be really helpful, along with other kinds of traditional medicine.
That's wonderful. I think we see it in Native American communities. We see it in African communities, and old, that is very much a part of the culture. It's I know when visiting Indonesia in Bali, they don't even have a word for art because it's just what everybody does. It's part of their daily living.
That's a great point. I think the word art has become in Western culture so rarefied that it's associated with some mythologies around you have to be good at it in order to be an artist. And in fact, there's some great studies that show just making art for 45 minutes will reduce your cortisol, which is the hormone that helps to reduce stress, by 25%. So I always say why Fred is a great singer. I'm sort of the poster child for not being a great singer. But the arts can actually, no matter if you're good at it or not, be very helpful in regulating some of those kinds of things. And so I think we need to really think about what does the word art mean, depending upon how you're using it, contextually, how you're bringing it to bear.
Yes, and learning as kids too. As Fred was saying, people talking to him saying you shouldn't be rocking, you shouldn't be doing this. There's something wrong with that. Rather changing that to there are no mistakes in art. When we have children learning in schools, and when art is put into disciplines across the board, everything works a little better and more fun actually for them, and more interesting. So yeah, that's wonderful.
Well, for children, it's prevention, right? It's a front end loaded way to think about prevention for longer term physical and mental health issues. So, thinking about the way art is not in schools, the way it should be, it really is it's really taking out a vital ingredient for how to help children build resiliency, build social emotional skills, think about executive function, all the things that we know creative problem solving, all the things that we know are really important and skills that we value when we become adults, we're in some ways denying kids the ability to be able to build those skills when they don't have them in schools, and that's really short-sighted.
It is indeed. It's something that we need to learn, to be able to do with our own children and do at home. Um,
It's a very
there's so many
empowering.
things. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's also a very, very empowering outlet for many veterans returning back from war, many returning warriors, and their families.
Thank you for bringing that up because we have talked about that. I lost a nephew to the Iraq War, and it was several years. This is in 2012, and my nephew Daniel, and he was looking for help, and there wasn't as much help back then, but it's changed quite a bit in the last 8 years, where there's a lot more help for veterans. And I'm so happy to see this. Tell us a little bit about the work that you two have done collaboratively for veterans.
Well, as Susan was speaking about earlier, the collaboration between the Department of Defense and the National Endowment for the Arts and Americans for the Arts kind of formalized at first clinical studies where art therapists and music therapists would use artistic expression as a way of helping veterans to cope with trauma, traumatic brain injury, or just reintegration, just a way of moving into another language, moving back into a place of being comfortable, being back in the community. And it has been just amazing. There's a specific program called Creative Forces. You have some amazing Creative Forces initiatives there in California, actually. And Creative Forces is really it's it's an initiative that is designed to take a broad look at how art and art therapy can be utilized in VA hospitals and in clinical care for veterans. And then we have throughout the United States 11 other programs that are demonstration projects that are designed to create support from clinic to community, so that art centers and theaters and facilities that create art can create therapeutic environments so that veterans, their caregivers, their family members and caregivers can have an outlet for the family to come together and for expression. Many of us know that there are many, many ways for us to feel comfortable expressing what's going on inside of us, especially in terms of dealing with or the articulation or the elimination of the damage done by trauma or moral injury, which war certainly um, causes. So we're honored to be a part of that initiative. We have a Florida initiative called Vet Art Span, and I would welcome folk to go to vetartspan.org. And it's a website that was created that has videos that are we have podcasts that are interviews with veterans and caregivers and art therapists and community members in the arts. You all in California have a dynamic dance company out of Los Angeles called the Diavolo Dance Company. And Diavolo did a project with the Performing Arts Center in Tampa, where they brought together dancers from the community and veterans from the community into a movement experience. They've done this in Los Angeles and around the country. So in terms of music and dance and theater and spoken word and art, visual art and photography, just a real proclamation and support of the idea that creative expression, not for the purpose of having a beautiful pictorial outcome, but just the process, as Susan said, of just creating art, just being engaged in the process of creativity has proven to be incredibly healing for many of our veterans.
And I'll add
I'm sorry, what is we'll post it in the chat. What is the website again that you had suggested?
It's Vet Art, so it's VETARTSPAN, vetartspan.org.
Okay, very good. And also, we have some questions from the audience. Time is going so fast, and there's a lot to talk about. But I do want to have Stephanie Weissman has a question. If I can unmute you, or you could unmute yourself, Stephanie. There you go.
I think I'm unmuted. Hi, Fred. So
Hi,
great to see
Stephanie. So
you.
good to see you.
And hi, Susan. Nice to meet
So
you
nice to
virtually.
meet you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Fred, that was, I don't want to pull away from the vet thing, but I wanted to ask, it was such a deeply moving piece about being adopted and pre-adopted and stuff like that. And I actually wrote a piece, I think we never talked about this, about adopting my own daughter at 7.
Wow.
And I wanted to ask both of you, I guess. I know I did a lot of work with the stats on adopted children, and they're not that great. They're not that great. And you seem to have turned out to be a marvelous human being. And I wonder if you think this music and the way you kind of healed yourself perhaps with the music when you were young, if that actually you think that had an impact on your ability to evolve into you're the wonderful person you have evolved.
Stephanie, I mean, I certainly believe that it was an important part of, I mean, on some level, from the inside out, I never felt alone. I could always go inward. I could always go to that place, or I could sort of articulate. But, I can tell you that many of the challenges that I've faced in my life, and especially in terms of a sense of worthiness or being accepted. I mean, there was, so much of my life where I was really driven to achieve, really driven to do the right thing because there was a part of me that felt like there must have been something wrong with me from my own mama to not, and that's a really, really hard hurdle to go over. I've had conversations, with my beautiful wife, and you know, mistakes that I made or challenges that I had were directly a byproduct of the fact that I didn't know how long love would last, So, I mean, so I think many children that are adopted, and I was adopted at a time where like the state just told people just don't talk about it. If you don't talk about it, it'll go away. It doesn't go away. Those first the scientific reality that those first 0 to 4 are so incredible. It really like kind of shapes you. So I had, I say that I went from the womb to a cocoon. For me, music was a cocoon for me. It was a place that I could escape. And when I lifted my voice, I felt like it the distance between me and others, it was a softer wind, you know. But I suffered a lot of, you know, internal challenge. But I do believe, without doubt, whoever I am today is in part because of what I went through in those first 4 years, and also because of Robert Johnson, who was my adopted father. You know what I mean? Who never he just said, I don't care what you do, just be the best at it. And of course, that was there was a whole nother reason for that, and that's kind of another story. But it's challenging. My wife and I, we adopted three girls, and I mean, and it's tough. It's really hard, but you have to understand you just don't know what's going on in that little mind. You just don't know what you've been through. When I talk to my brothers and sisters and the challenges that they went through, you know what I mean? It's hard because it's all in here. It's all inside. You can't figure it out, and you don't have anybody to talk to. So yeah, music was my medicine without doubt. It was my medicine.
And right now with COVID, it's so important that we do pay attention to the children. We don't, those of us who don't have children at home, we may not be seeing them every day because of the isolation. But as we do see them, and even sometimes I remind parents, because this is a tough time for all of us, but it's particularly tough on kids. And we know a lot of things going on in families too. So it's maybe also what we're seeing right now on the streets. We need to open our hearts and heal together, and as we work together to solve the problems that we can solve, and cope with the problems that we have to deal with COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that COVID has given us, to some measure, is a realization of life is fragile.
Indeed.
and that every human life is important. When I think about the challenges that I've faced in my life, one of the greatest challenges that I faced in my life, both as a little boy and throughout my life, is being Black and dealing with the reality that, I was told at a very early age, you got to run faster, you got to jump higher, you got to learn more, you got to make it in spite of. And so here we are at a place where we're giving an opportunity now where no human being should ever have to worry about in spite of. Being brown doesn't go away. There's no reason for there to be a divide. It's a construct that humanity created. Racism is a construct that humanity made. What we have to be is back to the business of understanding how to celebrate our humanity.
Absolutely. And we're seeing this all around the world with people coming together in support of this concept. I think the most of us do have this concept, and I am very hopeful that we can prevail. We have such a terrible problem in this country, but it's not only in this country,
No.
as we know.
Yeah, I don't know if I could just say one thing
Please.
about the arts in general, is that in a time where the country and the world is really trying to understand each other, and I think truly understand the systemic and systematic issues around race, sometimes there are no words. And I find myself leaning on song and visuals and poetry and dance to tell the story at a depth that words can't do. And I think that's another aspect of the arts, where artists can tell stories that we can't speak about right now. And that's also true in healing, where we talked about the military, where many people who have traumatic brain injury or PTSD literally cannot find the words because the language centers of their brains are shut down. And I think this is a time where we may not be able to find the words, but we can speak to each other in the language of humanity, which is the arts. And so I think it's another shout out for that.
Thank you. There's a comment from Deborah, returning to the discussion of poverty, of the term art. As I think some of what is going on is being art.
Mm-hmm.
She is saying, yeah, not just producing or even creating art, but being art. Very good comment.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Beautiful. And the art of being. I mean, because there's a lot of conversation in our world about what do we need to do differently? What do we need to do differently? The master teachers that I've studied with have always said to me, the journey is the journey of being. It's how we choose now to be different ourselves and to be different with each other. And then our doing will be for the greater good of all, because we have lived into a new reality, a sweeter reality of being.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I can't believe the time has really flown by. And is there any closing comments that you wanted to make, Susan?
Well,
probably so many, but I did also want you to know I posted in the chat some links to the website and your work there.
Well, thank you very much. I'm just honored and humbled to be able to share some of our work today, and also to be with Fred. So I just want to thank everybody for the time. It's really been really a gift.
Thank you so much. I look forward to learning more about impact thinking, and I so admire your work. And Fred, anything you would like to say, although you've said so many beautiful things, I appreciate them all.
No, again, thanks to Stephanie and to you, and to the vision of the Marsh to keep the dream alive, and all the work that's being done now in support of this conversation, and understanding that now probably more than ever artistic expression is so important. So thanks for allowing me to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you for attending this encore performance from 2020. We look forward to seeing you again in January 2024, when we'll welcome Frederick Johnson along with Susan Magsamen's breakthrough work from the International Arts and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, when we'll focus on her New York Times bestseller, Your Brain on Art, and conversation about how the arts transform us as we practice the integration of arts in healing. Thank you for joining us and ANCAN peer-to-peer support on Solo Arts Heal. See you next time.